Right, welcome everybody. And the first thing I've got to say is I applaud you all for coming out in this fantastic summer weather that we're enjoying at the moment. You notice I've got my summer jacket on. And since we all stopped wearing suits to work, whenever I put this jacket on, I feel like a game show host. So if I start overacting, I can only apologize. So welcome everyone to, Charlie, it's not working. There we go. Welcome to the July event of Brighton AI, and it's very nice to see you all here this evening. My name is Matt Thompson. I'm acting as your host. God, I still feel like a game show host. I'm CEO of Green Lemon Company, who is co-hosting the event tonight. I'm also one of the co-leads for Brighton AI. So I just want to talk a little bit about Brighton AI for a moment, if I may. And the important thing is that our 24-25 mission, our purpose, is to build a community of AI enthusiasts that embrace technology for good. That is the purpose of Brighton AI. And we're doing that through a number of shows like this and seminars and workshops, et cetera, And at the moment, we're standing at a community of 966 people signed up on the meetup. So I think, Grace, correct me if I'm wrong, we're one of the fastest growing meetups under Silicon Brighton. Very good. I think a round of applause for Brighton AI co-founders. And Brighton AI comprises of three very distinct work streams, in no particular order: innovation and commercialization, Brighton and beyond, and ethics and governance. This is our sort of current structure. And just to introduce all the players, we've got Mary Kemp. Where are you, Mary? At the back here. She is one of the co-leads for innovation and commercialization, who's just joined the co-lead group. And welcome, Mary. Second co-lead on commercialization and innovation is Graham Cox. Where are you, Graham? Here's Graham. And then Brighton and beyond, we have Martin Howe and Rose Tai. Rose is at the back there. Where's Martin? Here he is. And finally, BC. Where are you, BC? There she is. And myself on the ethics and governance side of the equation. We have our own website built lovingly by myself, so apologies right now if none of it's working properly, but I've done my best. And we're also available on an email address, and we're on LinkedIn and we meet up and so on. So finding us is pretty easy. And tonight's event is run and sponsored by the Ethics and Governance Workstream. Again, that's BC and myself. And BC's produced this wonderful graphic and a beautiful set of slides that's running on a continual loop at the back, all around the state of regulatory frameworks across Europe for the implementation of ethical AI. So a very important piece of work, and BC is our expert. So if you want to know anything about regulations, all you've got to do is grab BC and she can answer all your questions. So tonight's agenda, after the introductions, we have a very fine gentleman from Brighton, Jeff Davis, telling us about an offer he's making for the Brighton and Hove city community, which under the Pivotal Edge, his company. And then we have Daniel Hume. Now, Daniel's done a remarkable thing tonight. He's actually aged me by about 15 years by sending me a text saying that his train was cancelled. But the good news is he has arrived. And then we'll go to closing remarks and networking. But first of all, before we do that, just want to say, if you don't want your picture to appear on any of the live streaming or photographs, et cetera, do let us know and make sure we edit you out. And the refreshments tonight are being provided by Green Lemon Company, which is my little band of warriors that cohabit upstairs and do wonderful work, and by the fabulous Silicon Brighton organization, represented tonight by Grace, without whom we wouldn't be here doing this wonderful event. So I'm going to hand over now to Kerry Lockwood, who is the location manager for PlusX at Brighton.
Hello. I recognize a few of your faces, but for those of you who I don't know, welcome to PlusX Innovation Brighton. My name is Kerry and I'm the location manager. A little bit about who we are and what we do. We help bold thinkers do bold work. And we do this with access to our unique facilities like our prototyping workshop and our podcast suite. We also do this with programmatic support, proven to help scale your business and give you all the access to the expertise you need to grow. And we also do this with our fantastic community, some of which are in this room this evening. We love making sure that you can cross-pollinate and that you can collaborate with your fellow colleagues in the space. So that's what we do. And because we're so great at running events, we have not scheduled a fire alarm test during this event. So if you hear the fire alarm go off, it does mean we're evacuating. Your nearest evacuation points are just along this wall here. There is one behind the wall here, and obviously the cafe door over there. It's very air flight mode, isn't it? If you injure yourself or you witness somebody else being injured, please try and make sure that somebody stays with them if possible. Myself and the team who are working this evening are all first aid trained, and we're also mental health first aid trained. So if you need us, we're here to support you. That's it from me. Have a wonderful evening. And if any of you are interested in signing up or knowing a bit more about what we do at Plus X Innovation, then myself and anyone else wearing a lanyard is more than happy to help you. Enjoy.
Thank you, Kerry. And now a few words from Charlie, all about Silicon Brighton. Charlie.
Thank you so much, Matt. Hello to all of you. It's lovely to see you all here this evening. I want to echo Matt's sentiments. Thank you for coming out in the terrible weather. And hello, I'm Charlie from Silicon Brighton. We are the host of Brighton and Hove's Tech Sector, and we support over 30 different meetup groups across the tech and digital community in the city, including Brighton AI. All of the events that we run are free to join. They're available to people at all levels, and they're all hybrid. So obviously you're all in the room with us here this evening, but we're also running a live stream. Hello to everybody on YouTube, where you can watch the event online from home or wherever you are, and also then watch it back after it's finished as well. And all the work that we do wouldn't be possible with the help of our amazing supporters who you can see here. If there's an organisation who you know who might be interested in supporting us, who you can't see up on this list, please point them in our direction. We'd be very grateful for it. I'd like to give a special thanks and shout out as well to Octopus Energy, James Chase, Hyperion Dev, and the University of Sussex Business School. These are 4 of our sponsors, and they play a really key pivotal role in enabling us to do all of the work that we do. None of which would also be possible without a small army of volunteers and speakers and meetup organisers who make our world go around. If you'd be interested in giving a talk at an event or helping volunteer, helping us set up and pack up everything before and after, or helping out some of the meetup organisers of one of the over 30 different groups that we support, please come and have a chat with myself or Grace after the event. We would absolutely love to work with on everything across the internet. And we are just rounding off a fantastically busy July, but we're not done yet. We've got game dev drinks at the Caxton Arms tomorrow night, and then next week, the Brighton Data Forum and Async are both meeting in August as well. We are also, I'm very, very excited to be saying, marching in the Pride Parade again this year. We did this last year, and I'm so excited that we're going to be back in it again this year. Hopefully the weather will be a little bit better than it is today than it was last year. And the great news is that if you'd like to join us, you can. If you scan this QR code here, it'll take you to a sign-up link where you can join us on the day in the parade. What better way to enjoy it than to be a part of it yourself? You can also join our Slack community, which I'd really recommend doing if you haven't already. It's the best place to connect and share resources and network with different people that you meet at the events and that you could end up meeting at different events. And if you scan this code, it will take you to our events calendar, a link to the Slack community, and everything else that I've just gone through there. So that's everything from me. I'm going to pass back to Matt now, but thank you so much. Have a fantastic night, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.
So I'd like to introduce our first speaker this evening, a gentleman called Jeff Davis. He's a generative AI advisor at a Brighton company called Pivotal Edge, and he's got a very special offer for the city. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. What I want to talk to you about this afternoon, or this evening, is about the Pivotal Edge Everyday AI Academy. Oh. It's a clicker going to let me down. There we go. We want that one. Right, fantastic. Now, you might have noticed on Matt's opening slide there was a fantastic little phrase. Everybody see that where it said tech for good. Yeah. Now I'm a fantastic believer. I think it's a brilliant thing. Great believer in tech for good. So the idea with what we're doing here with the Everyday AI Academy is who uses tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, those kind of things, and who uses those on a daily basis. Yeah, it's loads of people. Fantastic. And would you go back? There's a question. Who would, if you said you were never going to, you had to stop using it, you couldn't use this anymore. Yeah. So you probably got this, I'm guessing, into your daily workflows you're using. And I don't know about you, but do you find yourself saying to friends and family and other people when they're saying, I need to write an email to somebody, I need to prepare for a job interview or whatever, and you think, oh, ChatGPT can help with that, Claude can help with that, and they kind of look at you a bit strange, like, why do you keep suggesting using ChatGPT to solve all the world's problems? But if you drunk the Kool-Aid, you know exactly what I mean, don't you? How good all this technology is. So the idea with the initiative is, what I want to do is just help ordinary people get on board and use these kind of tools, yeah, because when you start using it, it is just absolutely fantastic. So the idea is, what we're doing is some free training, making AI accessible and practical for absolutely everybody. Doesn't matter what tool it is, whether it's ChatGPT, it's Claude, it's Gemini, they all do pretty much the same kind of job, don't they? It's delivered as online training. You can see the date and the time that's up there. There's a QR code that comes up in a second with a link that goes to the registration page for it. Idea is, it's very short, very focused, 30 minutes with a Q&A, and it'll help people like your friends, family, and everybody just get using this technology. And of course, as you know, all these tools like ChatGPT and Claude are completely free to use as well. So there's absolutely no cost. What do you need? You need a tablet, a phone, or something like that. So, who does this benefit? Anybody really who's curious about using AI, maybe they've heard things about it, they're not sure how to start using it, particularly for non-technical individuals. It's all really easy for us in this room because we're probably quite technical people, tech savvy, so we're quite happy to jump on board with these kind of things. But imagine if you were, kids just coming out of school and they got their first job interview coming up. Yeah, and they're thinking, I've never been for a job interview. Maybe they've had a job at McDonald's. That's it. That's the extent of their interview experience. What would you do? Well, you could get into ChatGPT or Claude or something, couldn't you, and help prepare for interviews. Has anyone tried doing this? Yeah, and you can do things like, you can set up a Q&A. You can get it to ask questions back and forth. So what I want to do with this initiative is show people, like young people, how to do that. Or imagine somebody's got they're renting a flat or something and they need to get out of their tenancy agreement, run through an AI assistant and get it to summarize the key points, right? We know this, don't we? So ordinary people who've never used ChatGPT or Claude or anything wouldn't know how to do this kind of stuff. So I think it's really, really helpful to them to be able to do it. So lots of practical skills. It's free training. It's completely no cost. Lots of expert guidance on how to use them, how to do prompting and all of that kind of stuff as well, so that everybody can get on board and use these tools. So how can you help? I need your help. Firstly, I want to really refine and improve the idea. So if you've got any thoughts, any suggestions about what are good subjects, I've given 2 there. Job searching, preparing for interviews, looking at contracts. What else do you think? Ask your friends and family, what else do you think would be useful? And let me know. I really want to get some good feedback to really improve this. Talk about the delivery as well. It's going to be done as a webinar. Would it be useful to do it for certain community groups? Please do let me know. And the other thing as well is to promote it. So please, there's the QR code that'll link through to the Pivotal Edge website, and there's a link on there to do the registration. Spread the word. Friends, families, aunties, uncles, absolutely everybody is welcome to come in and join. Really want to make this a big community initiative to get as many people as we can in Brighton and Hove trained up to use these fantastic tools that we all know about. We've got the cheat codes. Let's share them with everybody else as well. So does that make sense? Can I count on your help? Fantastic. Thank you very much. Matt.
Thank you, Jeff. I don't know about you, but I think that's an outstanding offer for someone of Jeff's status, because I know you've just started a new business and you're very busy, but to offer that free of charge to the inhabitants of the city, I think is a wonderful thing. And certainly at Green Lemon Company, with all our channels, we're going to support you, Jeff. and hopefully everyone else in the room feels the same. We're great believers that AI should be accessible to all people, regardless of their financial standing, their academic standing, and so on. So I think what Jeff is doing is really important. And to some extent, showing us the way as a city that we need to embrace AI and these new technologies so they're not just in the hands of the people with the power and the wealth, but in everybody's hands. And with that, I'm going to get off my soapbox. But thank you very much indeed, Jeff. Just one more time, a round of applause for Jeff, please. Now I'm going to introduce Daniel. Now, the only difficulty with this is if I introduce him fully, it's going to make me feel like I've done nothing my entire life. So I'm just going to let him put his slide up. But basically, Daniel Hume is one of the world's recognized AI experts. And I believe in the top 10 most influential chief AI officers worldwide. So he knows his stuff, I think it's fair to say. He's a regular TED talker. He is CEO of a company called Satalia and also the CAIO of WPP. I hope I've got that right. A fellow of various institutes, he advises companies, governments, just about everybody on AI. And it is with great pleasure and a great privilege to introduce Daniel, our guest speaker for this evening. Daniel Hume, everybody.
It's also all made up as well. It's not true. Right. So, we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about AI and how to bring it into your organizations. We'll talk about how we can bring people and technology together to do amazing things. And we'll talk about the macro impact that these technologies are going to have on society. So we're going to get quite philosophical before drinks. I guess I've been involved in AI for about 25 years, my undergraduate, PhD, postdoctoral in AI from UCL. I ran a master's program for about 4 years where I had 100 students going out there applying these technologies. And now I'm entrepreneur in residence for UCL. So I helped them spin out deep tech companies like DeepMind a few years ago. That keeps me honest. It keeps me close to the tech. I started the company about 17 years ago that's been building AI solutions for some of the biggest companies in the world, like Tesco, PwC. I sold that company to WPP, the biggest marketing communications company in the world 3 years ago, where I'm now coordinating AI across about 120,000 people, which is good fun. So that's me, it's boring. So let's talk about AI. You did warn me about the clicker, that's true. So I guess over the past decade, there's been a lot of excitement around data. You know, companies have been building data lakes, putting Tableau or some sort of analytics layer on top, hiring machine learning or data scientists, and hoping that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it will lead to better decisions. If I'm being controversial, giving human beings better insights doesn't typically lead to better decisions. And decision making is a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. I would argue that companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems. And I would always start with trying to figure out how to solve the decision-making problem first and then work backwards. Turns out that human beings are rubbish at making decisions. I don't know if you've read the book by Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. So Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and he argues, late Daniel Kahneman, that we have a fast brain and a slow brain. There are parallels in terms of how these brains work with how AIs work. We'll talk about that later on. So I'm going to test these brains with you all now. I'm going to ask you some maths questions, okay? And your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible. If you don't answer them faster than your competition, they're going to take your market. So speed is important. Don't worry. We're going to start out nice and easy. So the first maths question is, okay, excellent. And then, okay, so the point here is that this one you use your intuition, you need to think about it, and this one you have to go through a process and algorithm to come up with the right answer. I'm going to ask you a few more maths questions. Again, we'll start out nice and easy. We're going to get more and more complicated. So slightly different context. So the combined price of a bat and a ball is £1.10. The bat is £1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? Okay, good. If you said 5 pence, you knew the answer already, didn't you? Yes, you cheat. If you said 10 pence, you're not broken. Don't worry. The bat is £1.05. The ball is 5 pence. The combined price is £1.10. The bat is £1 more than the ball. So that's where we use intuition and we get it wrong. And we're confidently using our intuition every single day, making the wrong decisions. And so let me ask you this. Imagine these are 5 staff members. And what we want to do is we want to allocate these 5 staff members to 5 jobs. Ignore these rules, they're not important. How many ways can I allocate 5 people to 5 jobs? 5 people, 5 jobs. How many possible solutions are there? Yeah, very good. 5 times 4 times 3 times 2. What time? The exclamation mark we learned in school, factorial. Let's make the problem a little bit more complicated. We've got 15 staff members. So how many ways can I allocate 15 people to 15 jobs? And don't say 15 factorial, it's cheating. So what does your fast brain say? How many ways can I allocate 15 people to 15 jobs? What does your fast brain say? Huh? Okay, so over 1 trillion possible solutions. So to expect a human to solve this problem, we are wasting our time. One rule to take away with you today: anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Okay, human beings are good at solving problems up to 7. Beyond that, we're useless. And actually, industry don't have problems of this size. They've got problems of this size. So here are 500 staff members. Can you tell me how many ways to allocate them? No, you can't. It's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. So once you reach about 60 things, 60 people that you have to consider, there are more possible solutions than there are atoms in the universe. Now, human beings are typically solving these problems badly in organizations, or you're using algorithms that are probably solving them badly. Algorithms are a differentiator for your business. One of my clients is PwC. They have 5,000 staff members here in the UK they need to allocate to jobs. They used to have 40 people whose full-time job it was to try and solve that problem. And we built an algorithm that can solve that problem significantly better than any human being in 2 hours. Talk more about that later if you want. Let's just drum this problem home. It's very important. So imagine you've got a delivery van, and your delivery van has to deliver packages around these 24 points around London. Humans are quite good at solving these spatial problems. So after a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path, the one that's going to save the most amount of time, petrol? Seconds? Milliseconds? 0.0 seconds, say somewhere between that and 20 billion years. If you put 24 times 23 times 22 times 20 into your calculator, you get this number of routes. That's how many routes there are, around 24 points. If you had a computer that could check 1 million routes a second, it would take 20 billion years, longer than the age of the universe, to go through every single possible one and say, this one I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one. You should do that. If I had another point to the map, it becomes 25 times 20 billion years, 5,000 billion years. Another point to the map, it becomes 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get ugly very, very quickly. If you choose the wrong algorithm, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right algorithm, it will take milliseconds. That is the differentiator in a business. So when I build systems for organizations, they usually have these 3 parts. If I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. But does anybody know the definition of stupidity? There you go. So I would argue controversially that by definition, automation is stupid. It's not intelligent. It's not AI. I know that everybody that currently touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients. We get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition, I actually think, is the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. So over the past 3 years, generative AI has allowed us to recognize objects in images, to correspond in natural language. And when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. I would argue humans are not that intelligent. That's a different conversation. Humans are good at finding patterns in 4 dimensions, and we're very good at solving problems up to 7. Computers can find patterns in thousands of dimensions, and they can solve problems with thousands of moving parts. Benchmarking machines against humans is a very silly thing to do. So there's a much better definition of AI that comes from the definition of intelligence. Instead of using human beings as the pinnacle of intelligence, there's this beautiful definition. It's goal-directed adaptive behavior. Goal-directed in the sense we're trying to route our vehicles to maximize deliveries, or allocate our workforce to maximize utilization, or spend our marketing money to maximize return. You have to have a goal, an objective function. Behavior is how quickly and well we can answer that question. Now, we've just discovered if you choose the wrong algorithm, it will take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right algorithm, it will differentiate your business. But the key word for me in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn about whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being honest with you all, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. And most systems in production are automation. Building safe, adaptive systems is extremely hard. It's 100 times more difficult than building automation, but adaptive systems for me are the true paradigm of AI. I know that Einstein wasn't a scholar of intelligence, but he said that intelligence is your ability to change. And you hear this concept of change, adaptation cropping up now over and over again when it's related to intelligence. So instead of, if I held what we currently do in industry to this definition, one might controversially argue that nobody's doing AI. And that's a ridiculous statement, because over the past several decades, new advances in algorithms plus data plus compute allow us to do some incredible things. Okay. And instead of using definitions and technologies to think about AI, I'm going to give you a different framework. Before I do, a little bit of a history lesson. So this is AI in the 60s and 70s. It's one of my favorite paintings. It's Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and all men are mortal, I can infer that Socrates is mortal. And AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world, trying to infer new knowledge. And it didn't really work. It didn't really scale. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeled on how brains work. This is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 20 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. They can do amazing things, right? They can navigate 3D worlds. They recognize objects. They talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't handle windows very well, but ultimately, they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million neurons in a machine? 20 years ago, you couldn't, but we can now model billions of neurons. And we currently call these large language models, okay? Large language models are really good at knowing things about the world. They're really good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. They are not good right now at reasoning. That's going to change. It's going to be a step change in their intelligence. And they're definitely not good at complex decision making. So you want to use these technologies to know things. You want to use these technologies to reason, make decisions to achieve your goal. And then you want to build systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. That's the true paradigm of AI. So anyway, before I'm going to give you a different framework to think about AI. Instead of looking at AI through definitions, I look at AI through applications. And I believe there are 6 categories of applications of these technologies that can be applied to any friction in any supply chain, in any industry. I'll say that again. Any frictions that you have across an organization can be mapped to one or more of these applications. Okay, so the first one actually is task automation. Go back. The fact is, if you apply simple algorithms, if then else statements, macros, robotic process automation, you can drive a massive amount of value in the business. You can replace repetitive, mundane tasks that human beings are doing by very simple algorithms. You don't need to gravitate to new shiny technologies like generative AI, machine learning. The next category is content generation. So I guess large language models give everybody in the world the ability to create generic content. And I would argue the battleground for companies is not creating generic content. The battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. If you go to ChatGPT and ask it what it thinks about AI, it's probably going to give you a McKinsey, Accenture Consulting 101 definition. It's not going to give you something differentiated or useful for your business. Going to an expert is going to give you something differentiated. In WBP, I'm in the ad world now. And we're in the business of creating content, and what we do is we create what we call brand brains. So we can train a brain on your guidelines, your tone of voice, your imagery, and then start to ask questions that now create brand-specific, almost production-grade content. Now, I'm going to geek out a second. There are broadly 4 ways of making brains smarter. So a large language model is a little bit like an intoxicated graduate. Okay, and one way of making an intoxicated graduate smarter is by asking it better questions, so prompting. And you can all learn to prompt better in seconds. The better questions you ask, typically you get better answers. That will get you to about 20% good. The next way of making an intoxicated graduate smart is by giving it your materials, let's say your brand guidelines, your imagery, etc. You ask it questions and it opens up your guidelines and it answers the questions from the book. And that takes minutes. It's called ragging. It's a terrible name. And that will get you to about 40% good. The next way of taking a graduate and making it smart is by turning it into a professor. Now, we know how long it takes a human being to go from a graduate to professor. It takes years of training, trial and error, experimentation, learning. Currently, it takes weeks to take a large language model and to tune it and train it to become a professor of something. What we do in WPP when we create brand brains, actually we create a consortium of professors. A professor that's an expert at your culture, your values, a professor that's an expert at your written copy, your imagery, and you have to get then all of these different professors, all of these experts, all collaborating, coordinating to create a better solution. And that will get you to about 80, 90% good. A little bit like people. You've got different people that have different skills that you need to coordinate and collaborate. It's called agentic computing. I don't know if you've heard of it, agentic computing. Talk about that later if you want. Anyway, so the next category is human representation. So a few years ago, I'd be talking about how we can replace people in, I don't know what's going on with the microphone, people in call centers with things, AIs that look and behave like human beings. But one of the ideas I want you to take away today is a concept that we call audience brains. So large language models are not only good at creating content, they're also good at representing how people perceive content. This is a really important idea. Historically, if I show you an ad or a policy or some promotional material, I didn't know what goes on in your mind and body unless I asked you. And people are not very good at reporting on what goes on in the mind and body. But for the first time ever, we can recreate what goes on in those signals that happen in your mind and body. We can use those signals to now create better content, but also more accurately predict activation. How is that content going to land? And it's still very much an art to understand how people perceive content. How you perceive content is not based on your date of birth or your address or your postcode or whatever. It's whether you've just fallen in love, how well your football team just played at the weekend, how much money you have in your account, the weather, the time of the day. Understanding the data that you need to understand perception, I think, is actually a differentiator. The fourth category is just one thing to mention there is that we in WPP we're also creating brains that don't just represent target audiences but represent every corner of society. So we can build brains that represent cultures, political parties, newspapers, minority groups, even things like legal frameworks like ad claims, food compliance claims, sustainability claims, so that when we're creating content across our supply chain, you can then show it to these council of AIs to make sure you're not triggering any communities, breaking any laws, or causing any harm. We can use AI to help us create responsible and safe content. The fourth category is what people called AI before generative AI 3 years ago. Machine learning is data science. You already know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks, likes, and sales. But what machine learning can do is it can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. Now, no human being would have identified that complex correlation in the data. Machine learning, the power of machine learning is explaining the world to allow us to make better decisions. And we've already talked about complex decisions. Now that I can now predict activation or whatever, I need to make some decisions about where I place those ads, or where do I place my people, my workforce, where do I place my resources to maximize the return on my investment. And we've already discovered that this is one of these exponential problems. It's not machine learning, it's not generative AI, it's optimization and operations research. The final category is human augmentation. So a few years ago, again, I'd be talking about how we can use exoskeletons, cybernetics to make ourselves faster, better, stronger. It's going to sound really creepy, but one of the things that we're doing with one of the biggest brands in the world is for each one of their employees, we train a large language model on that digital footprint, their email, their calendar, their feedback, their documents, and we can ask that digital you, that digital twin, if I put you on this project, will you work well? If I put you on this team, will you thrive? And it's being actually embraced by those employees because they feel like their digital twin represents them better than 5 numbers in a HR database. And it really does. And actually, I think over the next 3, 4, 5 years, we're going to start having digital twins of both our personal lives and also our professional lives. And those digital twins are going to be used to make decisions, going to be used to make decisions about our work, and going to be used to make decisions about what we purchase and things like that. They're going to be called personal assistants. The reality is they're not assistants, they're you. They're trained on your data. They are trying to represent you. Okay, so I love this framework because it allows you to navigate this complex world of AI safety, security, ethics, governance. There's a lot of misunderstanding, misinformation associated with these words. I would argue broadly there are three categories of risk associated with AI. The first category of risk I call micro risks, which are deploying these technologies in production in a safe and responsible way. And actually, I think there are three questions you need to ask yourself when deploying these technologies safely. The first question is actually an ethics question. And I know there's lots of people that have rebranded themselves as AI ethicists. I controversially would argue there's no such thing as AI ethics. Ethics is the study of right and wrong. And the difference between human beings and AIs is that AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent. And it's intent that needs to get scrutinized from an ethics perspective. There are already well-established structures and frameworks and standards to scrutinize intent. Once you've deployed something in production, then there are two questions you need to ask yourself. And they're safety questions. The first question is, are my algorithms explainable? The difference between software and AI, or the main difference, is that AI tends to be opaque in terms of how it makes its decisions. And that's a problem because we need to make them safe. And so if you can make your algorithms explainable, then you knock off a lot of these words. They become transparent, auditable, governable. Explainability is critical in building safe systems. The third question you need to ask yourself is not what happens if my system goes wrong. As engineers, we always ask ourselves, what happens when things go wrong, and how do we play whack-a-mole to try and prevent that risk? You now have to ask yourself, what happens if the AI goes very right? For the first time ever, AI can move the needle significantly, and it can actually then start to cause harm elsewhere. So in the marketing world, for example, actually there's a human bias called homophily, which is we tend to like to engage with people that look and sound like us. So if we left AI to optimize ads, we end up with a situation where you have you selling to you. And that could be enforcing biases and bigotry and social bubbles. And we need to think about what happens if AI goes very right. With the PwC example, the goal for PwC was to maximize utilization, billable hours. If we can maximize billable hours of these 5,000 employees, then this would be great for the business. We built an algorithm that overachieved that goal, which of course the PwC was extremely happy about. But what happened is that people would have been driving longer distances to clients wouldn't be getting the continuity that they wanted, employees wouldn't be having time to train. So it actually had an adverse effect on other parts of the supply chain. So AI can overachieve its goal, but cause harm elsewhere. And you all know the classic example that if I asked an AI to eradicate cancer, the easiest thing is to eradicate human beings, right? That's achieving its goal. So that's the first category of risk, which are micro risks. There are malicious risks, which is essentially preventing bad actors from using these technologies to create pathogens and things like that. And then there's another set of risks that I call macro risks, which we'll talk about later on. It'll get philosophical. So before I do, let's just talk about innovation. So I'm sure you don't have any problems like this in your organizations, but this is a hierarchy. And hierarchies breed certain types of interesting relationships. This is not a picture of my company, although most people do sell drugs to each other. That's quite common in my company. And I would argue that these structures are not conducive for innovation. Remember, the faster you can innovate, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. So an organization is a system, and we need to make that system as intelligent as possible. So companies are then embracing agile and scrum and design thinking, which is a great thing because the principle here is that it enables our organization to adapt more quickly to a rapidly changing world. I would actually argue that this technology is not the differentiator. We all have access to these technologies. These technologies have been around for a long, long time. Oh, I don't know what's going on there. The differentiator is three things. The first is data. It's data that makes the AI smart. If you have data that is differentiated from your competitors, then you're going to be more likely to win. So differentiated data is critical. The second is AI talent. I don't know why it's doing that, sorry. Is AI talent. And a lot of people think that they can attract deep AI talent. And the reality is that they can't, or they can for a few years and they'll bugger off. And so being really honest with yourself about whether you can attract and engage AI talent to build differentiated innovations is critical. I'm very happy to advise on how you might do that. And the final differentiator is actually leadership. If leadership are not bought in and they don't understand the transformational power of AI, then you're wasting your time. So when I'm looking at businesses, successful businesses, I'm looking for differentiated data, talent to build innovations, and a bought-in leadership. If you have those three things, then you're on the journey to being more innovative. Steve Jobs had a really great definition for innovation. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That is generating ideas and getting to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. And that process is long and hard and painful. You as entrepreneurs, if you are entrepreneurs, embody that process. You have to take some idea and get it to the point where somebody's paying for it. And the faster you can make that process, the more intelligent you are. So I guess, okay, I will talk about this. So I guess over the past few decades, we've seen a flattening of organizations moving from these rigid hierarchical structures to thinner structures. And I think that's good. It's a step in the right direction. I'm very interested in the concept called liquid organizations or decentralized organizations. My company was only about 150 people when it was acquired, but we didn't have any fixed managers, fixed hierarchies. People were free to work where they want, however they want, even before COVID. And just to give you an idea about how to create a liquid organization, is that we pull all of our different data sources together and we create these models of our company. So this is people's influence, their skills, their relationships. And I can identify, for example, if one of these two people leave at the bottom, I get a silo. I can identify people who need feedback, who should be giving them feedback. It does raise lots of interesting ethical questions. I can identify secret lovers in my company, people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. And but the point here is that we use these insights not to squeeze more utilization out of people. We use these insights to allocate people to work that aligns with their values and the values of the company. So you need to think about how do you organize yourselves in a way that unlocks the capacity of your employees. And then I will talk about this. Okay, so one of the things I used to do before I realized it was illegal is that we used to make everybody in the company make public recommendations for their salary. So everybody would declare publicly what they want to be paid, and then people would then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we would use AI to determine how many votes one person has for another. So if I've worked very closely with you and I'm very knowledgeable about your domain, I will have more votes for your salary than somebody else. And I know it sounds crazy, but the goal is to figure out how do you get the best diverse group of experts to make the decision. I know it sounds crazy, but in hierarchies, you typically have people making decisions that are not the right people. What AI is enabling is this ability to create liquid or fluid hierarchies to get the right people making the right decision. This is how I think organizations need to run. Not that they do. So I guess we recognize that AI has been applied to improve core productivity. It's allowing us to write emails better and PowerPoints and all that kind of stuff. And everybody will benefit from those productivity improvements. It's not going to differentiate your business. You can apply AI across your supply chain. So you can accelerate your digital transformation. And maybe even you can use AI to completely disrupt your company or disrupt an industry. What I think that organizations are ultimately trying to do is create what is called a digital twin of their supply chain. So let me try to explain. So if I go to a retailer and say, I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand for one of your products by 10%. Can you tell me, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough distribution drivers? Do you have enough people in your stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? Most organizations can't project these questions across their supply chains because they're disconnected. What a digital twin ultimately allows you to do is to do that and to enable your organization to adapt to a changing world. I think there are 3 digital twins. The first one is your operations, the flow of goods across your supply chain. The second one is your workforce, that liquid layer of hopes, dreams, desires you need to allocate on top. And then finally, back office processes. Look, we all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. I think most of us know that processes are bureaucratic and a blocker to innovation. So expenses in one company I know, the expense policy is that you ask your manager for some money to go to a conference. It goes up an email chain, and somebody says yes or no, and they don't know what they're saying yes or no to. Bad way of making decisions. In Gore-Tex, I think what they do is they actually let people expense whatever they want. All of the expenses are publicly available, but people then self-police each other. So rather than having these layers of bureaucracy, there's a self-policing and I think more humane method of doing processes. So I think, you know, all of those companies that are going to survive and thrive need to create these three digital twins and converge them over the next 5-7 years. All right, let's talk about the future. We're going to get a bit controversial. So I don't know if you know who said this at the top. The nation that leads in AI will be the rule of the world. Do you know who said that? It was Putin, Vladimir Putin, yeah. I think we need to acknowledge that. And in fact, actually, I got the whole thing translated. He was actually advocating that these technologies should be made available to everybody because I think that Russia was a bit behind. Anyway, I think the point is that these technologies are not just going to have the most transformational impact on our business, they're going to have the most transformational impact on society. And you might have heard the word singularity. Singularity, it comes from physics. It's a point in time that you can't see beyond. And it was adopted by the AI community, Ray Kurzweil, to refer to the technological singularity, and which is the point in time where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than us. I'll come back to that in a moment. I think there are at least 6 singularities that we are facing as a species over the next 10 years, 20 years that we need to think about. And I've tried to use the PESTLE framework. So you might be familiar with the PESTLE framework. It's a macro framework to capture these singularities. So the first one is a post-truth world. A world where we no longer know what is true. Now, AI, misinformation, bots, deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, and they continue to challenge our political foundations, but they're also now starting to challenge the fabric of our reality. So with a few dollars and a little bit of, you know, sample of people's voice and imagery, you can clone them. And I know people who are being attacked by clones of their children, of their work colleagues. In fact, actually, Mark Reed, the CEO of WPP, was cloned 3 months ago, and somebody tried to set up a board meeting to do some fraud. So I know people who are creating safe words to make sure they're talking to human beings instead of AIs. Now, I actually think that this problem can be solved. I think we can use AI to determine the harmfulness of content, and then we could use things like blockchain to authenticate that content. Is that coming from an authentic source? So we could actually solve this problem. The environmental singularity you're all familiar with. So, you know, AI is increasing consumption. And as far as I'm concerned, consumption gives people access to goods and services that typically enrich their lives. We know that it's putting pressure on our planetary boundaries, and we know there are people that overconsume. But I know that if we apply these technologies in the right way, we could at least halve the amount of energy that we need to run this planet. And the reason why I know that is because when I go and solve Tesco's last mile delivery problem or workforce allocation or any problem, we typically reduce the amount of carbon by 25% and unlock more capacity. If you then start to co-optimize across your supply chain, you can get another 25% of carbon reduction. We could halve the amount of energy and unlock more capacity if we apply these algorithms in the right way. This is not my expertise, but there are scientists that believe there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is advancing medicine. It's able to monitor our cells and clean our cells out. And a bit like a car, if you stay on top of damage, that car will never ever break down. And actually, I don't know what the world will look like when we realize there are people amongst us that won't have to die. There's actually a new company that was just created called, I think, Tomorrow Bio. Have you heard of Tomorrow Bio? So for £25 a month, you could subscribe to being cryogenically frozen when you die. And when you die, you have to pay £70,000 for your head, £200,000 for your body, but that can come out of your life insurance. But for $25 or £25 a month, you can freeze yourself. Anyway, so the technological singularity is the point in time where we become the second most intelligent species on this planet. And my community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 30, 40 years. We think it might now happen in the next 10 or 20 years. And we don't know if it's going to be the most glorious thing that happens to us or our biggest existential threat. My advice to people is that when it comes, look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. That's what I hope will happen. And actually, this is a secret, don't tell anybody, but I've just started a research company invested in actually by WPP to solve machine consciousness. So machine consciousness is going to become a thing very soon. Either human beings are going to start to attribute consciousness to machines that are not conscious. I think the majority of Americans think that GPT is conscious. Or we might be building machines that are conscious and not realizing it. And there's a guy called Nick Bostrom who wrote a book called Superintelligence. He coined the term mind crime, which is if we end up building conscious AIs and not realizing it, we could be putting them in harm or torturous situations. Now, we have a duty of care, not just to ourselves or to animals, but we also have a duty of care to AIs. And Consium, which is this consciousness company, is looking at how do we mitigate the risk of building unsafe conscious machines. And that's predicated on a new emerging technology called neuromorphic computing. So large language models are not actually how our brains work. Large language models are big networks of numbers that multiply together, which is why GPUs are very important. Our brains run on the power of a light bulb. And we learn very quickly, we adapt very quickly. And there's some new emerging technologies I've been tracking for the past couple of decades that is going to power robots, it's going to power the next generation of AI. And that neuromorphic computing is much more aligned with how biological brains work. So we're going to be creating more biologically orientated brains very, very soon. The legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. So, these technologies are amazing at understanding people. I'm, in the business now of understanding perception, and marketing is in the business of influencing perception in a safe and responsible way. But being able to influence people is an incredibly powerful position to be in. And what we want to do is we want to mitigate the risk of these technologies being used by bad actors to accumulate more wealth and more power. And again, I think that we can solve this problem. All of these are singularities, which means we don't know what's going to happen. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, okay? The final singularity is my favorite singularity. It was coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. I'd highly recommend his books. I'm nearly finished. And so this is about job losses. Now, for the past 17 years, my company has been applying AI to solving problems where people have been freed up to do more important, impactful, purposeful things. They have not lost their jobs. And I think that for the next 10 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of new innovations, new opportunities. Jobs will be displaced and disrupted, but people are going to have an opportunity to contribute more to humanity. AI is an energy source that will allow us to grow. Beyond 10 years, I don't think that anybody knows what they're talking about. And to give you kind of two extremes of the argument, the one extreme is that when companies can free up whole jobs, we probably will. The pressure to reduce costs, increase profits means that we will free up whole jobs. If that happens very quickly, our economies might not be able to rebalance fast enough, and it will create social unrest. And it's a real risk. I think, UBI and 4-day working week and other mechanisms might be needed to take the edge off that problem. The other extreme, and this is very controversial, is that we should be accelerating as fast as possible to this singularity. We should be automating the production and dissemination of food, healthcare, education, energy, transport. If you can remove the friction, which usually means human labor, from the creation and dissemination of these goods, you can make them free. So imagine what the world would look like if you were born into a world where there wasn't paid work, but everything that you needed to survive and thrive as a human being is free, is abundant. So people say to me, Daniel, what would I do if I didn't have a job? A job defines who I am as a human being. I know lots of people who don't have jobs. In theory, I don't ever have to work again. I sold my company. I'm working harder now than I've ever worked. Most of the people I know that don't have jobs, they're not sitting at home bored and depressed. They're using their time to do something that contributes to humanity. So I'm going to ask you a question. What would you do if you didn't have to do paid work and everything was free? What would you do? Well, music, yeah. Golf is usually the first one I hear. Write books, surf, yeah. Indulge in your hobbies, travel, read. What else? Spend more or less time with your friends and family. What else would you do? Workshops, yeah. What else? Exactly. So you keep pushing people hard enough and they say the same thing, which is they'll do all of these nice things that make you happy, but they'll also do something that contributes to humanity. I think we all have an innate desire to want to make the world better for other people or for animals or whatever. And unfortunately, we are all born into economic constraints preventing us from doing that. So I'm going to close by saying it's not good enough for organizations just to have a strong, profitable business. If you don't have a purpose, you're not going to attract AI talent, and you're probably not going to attract customers. I joined WPP because I believe in their purpose, which is to use the power of creativity to make a better future. I think a better future is a world where everybody is free to live beyond themselves, to use their creativity, their time to contribute to humanity however they want. And I don't think it's governments that will solve that problem. I think it's you, it's enterprise. If you think about your purpose, if you think about the purpose of the brands that you consume from, if AI can help you achieve that purpose, it's the collective purpose of enterprise that actually makes this world better. And we're seeing it already with open source. Right? These large language models are available to everybody on the planet. I don't know how many mobile phones you go through every year. I go through 2 a week at the moment. If we gave those mobile phones to people that didn't have access to computers, if those mobile phones were connected to the internet, then education becomes free. Everybody on the planet will be able to use these technologies to be able to do things that are interesting. I don't think we are far away from a world of abundance. And I want to work with as many people as possible to make that a reality. So on that note, I'm going to stop and open to questions. Thank you for listening.
So we're now going to go over to Q&A, but just before we do, I think it's fair to say that was a presentation at pace. There's an awful lot of content in there, and I know you're looking forward to Q&A for Daniel. So questions, we have a roving mic. Martin, if you could, this gentleman at the back here.
Testing, there we go.
Hey, thanks, Daniel. I've been really exploring how AI can understand us as humans better, the mind, body, soul, spirit, all of that. One thing is people have been in healthcare industry have been able to crack brain, heart, but soul and spirit is an unknown territory. We take our decisions out of it, but we don't really understand ourselves internally that well. Do you feel it's important for us as humans, I'm asking a very broader question here, to understand how can AI really help us understand ourselves much more better? Is the question here, have you been able to do any work around this? Or
I guess, so I think it's really important to know oneself. Right? I think that philosophers have been arguing that for a long time. And it was funny that but years and years ago, there was a plugin that you could get on Facebook called You Are What You Like. It was about 12 years ago. And just by analyzing 200 of the things that you liked on Facebook, they could profile you better than your partner. And so I don't think you need to have a huge amount of data or information to understand human behavior. Understanding kind of what motivates us, what makes us happy. I mean, this is things that have been discussed for millennia. And you know, I think if you read philosophers, there's a lot of answers in there, and you know, different ideologies. But yeah, so could AI make us understand ourselves better? I think there's already a lot of information out there. What AI could do is it could help us access that information. And I also hope it can help us create a dialogue. So I guess, you know, the rhetoric is that algorithms on social media platforms are trying to kind of reinforce biases and bigotry and social bubbles and polarization, and they may or may not be doing that. But you know, one of the things that AI could do is create a safe dialogue. And actually, one of the things that I'm building is an app that's linked to Conscium, this consciousness company called Moral Me. It's going to be launched in the next 3 months, and the idea is that human beings are going to be able to submit moral dilemmas, any moral dilemma, and then people are going to then answer those moral dilemmas based on their demographics, their age, their religious ideologies, whatever. And what you'll do is you'll get an understanding about what do we agree on as a species. And by the way, that might still be wrong, because there might be scholars that say, even though the crowd say that this is the right thing to do in this situation, it's actually still the wrong thing to do. So, but what it will do is it'll give you a benchmark to understand what do we agree on as a human being, and what do we disagree on based on our different demographics and differences. And what I hope it will do is it'll start a dialogue to help us understand how to challenge ourselves and each other in a safe and responsible way. Not only that, I then hope it will then be used as a test suite. So what we have essentially is a benchmark of tests, moral dilemmas, where we have human beings that have answered them, and we could be able to then run large language models or AI against them and see how do my AIs diverge from human morality. It's a long answer to a question, sorry. Yes is the answer, I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Great talk, thank you. I would love to know more about how you build your brand brains. Like, what's the process and what do you use to do that? What's the process, and then how do the people at WPP, how do they interact with that?
Yeah, good question. So I mentioned to you that ragging, which is what we're seeing a lot of on the internet, where you upload some documents and then you ask it questions and it answers them elegantly, which is still very, very powerful. If you just uploaded your, if you went to, I don't know, Midjourney now and say create an image of a Mars bar, it's not really going to know what you're talking about. It might get the color black, but it won't really know what you're talking about. So large language models are good at doing different things. And the bad analogy is that you might have one large language model that's very, very good at painting. Okay. And, but the large language model is not very good at being told what to do. That's a bad example. They're very good at painting, but it takes a long time to teach that large language model about something. So let's say we want to teach that large language model about Mars bars, but it takes a long, long time. So one large language model is good at painting, but we've got another large language model that's actually very good at knowing things very quickly that we could teach about Mars bars. Now we've got another large language model that has to look at what's been painted so far to translate it into text so they can go and ask this other large language model what's been painted so far. Then you've got another large language model that then asks the question, what should they do to change the painting to get it closer to a Mars bar? Does this make sense at all? So a bit like people. So I probably have an unhealthy relationship between the difference between large language models and people, but a bit like having different people have different expertise. How do you get them coordinating and collaborating? And there are some large language models that are good at one thing, and there are other large language models that are good at another thing. So you want to get a large language model that's good at written copy, another large language model that's good at painting, another large language model that understands deeply your values and all that kind of stuff. And then you need to get these kind of facilitators all getting kind of collaborating and communicating to try and create good content. But I would also say you need to have a human in the loop. So we then engage with brand experts, the people that can ask questions, corner cases of these brand brains to make sure that they're actually answering them in the right way. So it's really important to have these brand geniuses to train and teach these models. So that's how we do it. And it's going to get even more complicated because when you're, for example, creating an ad for a car or a 3D asset, then your large language model is not really good at creating 3D accurate renders of, I don't know, L'Oreal, perfumes or Ford cars. So what you have to do is you take these 3D assets and somehow merge it with generative AI, and that pipeline is also very complicated. That said, over the next 5 years, what I think will happen is that at the moment, as I said, these large language models are a little bit like intoxicated graduates. They're gonna level to maybe master's level in the next 6 months, which is reasoning, the ability to challenge concepts, the ability to create new information about the world. Then in 18 months, there'll be a PhD level. And I think somebody's already argued that ChatGPT 5 that's coming out soon is already like a PhD level. Now, I'm not saying it's a PhD level in terms of knowledge. It's a PhD level in terms of how it approaches the problem. If you go and ask a PhD, how do you solve this problem? They'll break it down. They'll create different hypotheses. They'll create experiments to test those hypotheses. And that's a skill. You need to learn to do that. Then from a PhD, you'll get to a postdoc. And then from a postdoc, you'll get to a professor. It's sort of predicted by the end of this decade, we'll have a professor in our pocket. And in fact, actually, I'm going to name drop now, but I found myself on a yacht in Cannes 4 weeks ago with Elon Musk, pitching him Contium, and he thinks that we're a year away from AGI. I think he's always been quite over optimistic about this, if I'm honest. And Sam Altman, I think, thinks we're probably by the end of this decade. But it's likely that between now and the end of this decade, we're going to create an AI that's as smart as the professors on this planet. And the next obvious question you would ask it is, go and create an AI smarter than you. And then what happens is you get this fast takeoff and create super intelligence. So, but to answer your question, right now, you've got to get these different kind of intoxicated graduates trained and working together. And then soon it'll be sort of PhD level brand experts. So I think that brand brains are probably likely to be more commoditized over the next 5 years than, let's say, audience brains. Audience brains, it's all about the data. It's all about what signals you need to represent how audiences perceive things. It's not about how smart you are. It's about the data.
Thank you for the talks. Very interesting. Was wondering, it sounded like you were putting fine tuning over like a RAG solution, essentially in a way. But you're also talking about this cross communication between models. But are you saying there'd be more of, say, a combination of all three for a clearer future in terms of responses and accuracy in what people are requesting, and making sure that's as clear and directed as possible in terms of what they're asking?
Exactly. So I guess the point here is that you've got these different kind of these intoxicated graduates that don't have any specialist knowledge, and some of them you can RAG, because that's all you need to get it to the level that you need to then communicate with others. Some of them you need to tune and to become really good at, or an expert at their domain, and then you need to be able to coordinate them. But yes, the answer is all three, as well as gluing technologies that make them all work in a collaborative and safe way. Yeah.
First off, brilliant talk. Like others have said, I don't know if you actually took a breath, so don't know what you do with your lungs, but you ended on quite a positive point about the kind of future of AI. And I was reading about, Scary Smart by Mo Goddard and kind of a bit more dystopian Armageddon types. Been reading a bit about it, and I think we're past the tipping point already in terms of machine learning, exponential growth, and pretty some dark things. What's your genuine personal view?
My genuine personal view is that if I thought we were doomed, I wouldn't be here. I would be trying to buy a bunker somewhere to keep myself safe for as long as possible. That I'm here because I genuinely believe that if people like you can be leveled up in your ability to make better decisions about AI, then we'll solve the problem. So I think ultimately it's within your gift. It's within all of our gifts to make a better future. We have to hold ourselves accountable. We have to hold our leadership accountable. We have to hold our governments accountable. But this is a really crucial time that we have to think carefully about it. So what I want to do is kind of raise the awareness around this topic. But I wouldn't be here if I wasn't hopeful.
Oh, hi. First of all, I really enjoyed that talk.
Thank you.
I've got kind of two small questions. You can choose which one you
Small
want to answer.
questions usually need big answers.
So the first one is on intelligence. I don't really like the term AGI, but what do you think about initiatives like the ARC test? Do you think that's a good step forward to getting that level of intelligence? And number two, with consciousness, do you believe that consciousness has to be embodied, whether it's carbon or silicon, or do you think it can exist independently?
Great questions, and they are actually hard questions to answer. Thank you. So there are actually different definitions of AGI. So one AGI might be as intelligent as the average human being. I hate that term. That's Sam Altman's term. But other people think that an AGI needs to be able to do sort of all of the kind of cognitive, physical things that a human can do, like cut hair and stuff like that. So what's generally intelligent? Is it just your cognition, or is it your ability to interact with the world? So I think tests for intelligent are fine, but I think that we'll see what happens actually when we start to put large language models in robots to see how well they're going to actually interact with the world. It will be a test of intelligence. I think I'm more worried about building something so smart that you can ask it to go and push the boundaries of intelligence, and that's where you get the fast takeoff. I'm not sure I've answered your question well enough there, but the second question is, do you need embodiment? Now, I think one of them, there's lots of books out there. I think 10 years ago, if you were a researcher studying consciousness, you'd have been called crazy. But now it's becoming cool and important. And I've managed to attract, I think, probably the world's leading advisory board on conscious AI. And one of the books I would recommend is by a guy called Mark Solms. It's called Hidden Spring or Hidden Springs. And I think that is the seminal book on consciousness. Mark Solms is a credible human being. There are other books out there. There's a book by Anil Seth called Being You. Anil Seth suggests that actually you need to have physical embodiment. You need to have immune systems and physical cells to have consciousness. Mark Solms doesn't. He thinks that we can simulate embodiment in a machine, but you still need embodiment. You still need a sort of a physical, a virtual thing interacting with an environment, whether that be physical or virtual, and an interface between it. And the kind of crux is then aware of oneself. Now the question is, what does it mean to be aware of oneself? That's where the devil is in the detail. But you do need to probably have some sort of embodiment. What I'm doing in Consium actually is one of the things that we're thinking about is how do we evolve agents or AIs that are very simple in simple environments and evolve them where the environment determines behavior. Let me say that again. You can create an environment where you have to fight each other to survive, or you could create an environment where you have to cooperate to survive, or have sacrifice to survive, or whatever, be altruistic to survive. So our environment, in some respects, can determine the behaviors that emerge through the evolutionary process. And I'm interested in how can we create environments that force behaviors that we might deem to be positive, like altruism and sacrifice and whatever. How can we embed those behaviors into the neurons of an AI? Like they're embedded in our unconscious, rather than trying to program an AI to behave itself and then try and play whack-a-mole when it goes wrong. So this interesting intersection between the environment and how it steers your behaviors is interesting, which is why we're creating Moral Me, because we want to understand what is a moral system that we want to align an AI with. And then can we create an environment where we evolve those AIs to have those behaviors? And the hypothesis is that by aligning those behaviors with those morals, it's more robust than just trying to program it. That's the hypothesis.
Thank you so much. We've got a question from somebody who's been watching online as well. Arusha says, thank you for your talk. Can you speak more around the brain operating on the power of a light bulb?
So I thought you were going to say, can you speak more slowly? That was so go and Google neuromorphic computing or spiking neural networks. So when I was building the Bumblebee brains 20 years ago, I realized that the bottleneck to building big brains was how quickly you can essentially change the weights in these neural networks. The way that neural networks work is that you show it an output. So you give it an input, provides an output, and you say, well done, that was good, or that was bad, and then you change its weights, the numbers, so that it produces something that you wanted to produce later on. And that process takes a lot of computation. And at the time, I realized that I needed to understand algorithms much better to be able to build bigger brains. Turns out that Jeff Hinton at the time, one of the godfathers of AI, tried to use GPUs to solve this problem. So instead of applying an algorithmic approach, they parallelized the processing on a GPU, which is why NVIDIA, of course, is now very successful. But large language models are hugely computationally intensive. They need lots and lots of images and data to be able to learn. When we are looking at the world, only small portions of our brain are being activated. And our brains don't propagate numbers, they propagate spikes. Spiking neural networks is the other thing that you need to Google. And sending spikes allows you to deal with continuity, time and space much better than large language models. But also spikes contain a lot more information than just numbers. The sequence of spikes, the gap between the spikes, how many spikes, there's more information that can be captured there than just in some numbers. But it's again, only small portions of our brain that actually are activated. I know there's this saying, which is we only use 10% of our brain. That's a good thing, right? Because if all of our brain was activated, we'd be a mess. So we only want to use a small portion of our brain. And actually, there's a concept called the free energy principle by Carl Friston, who is, again, probably the world's leading neuroscientist. He's also on my advisory board. And the free energy principle, very, very, very simply, and probably incorrect, is that I have an expectation about the world. And if my behavior results in that expectation being met, then I don't need to change. Nothing needs to happen. I don't need to expend any energy. If my behavior is, if what I expect is different to what actually happened, then something needs to change. Some aspects of my brain or my understanding of the world needs to change. And the free energy principle is trying to essentially minimize the amount of energy. And he essentially suggests that consciousness is being aware of the changes that we need to make between being what we expect to happen and what really happens. I think that's a bastardization of what it is. So anyway, ultimately, we want to try and use as little energy as possible in our brains. Yeah, these are hard questions.
But, thank you so much for your talk. It was really, really good. I have a social question around implications of AI. Over the last couple of years, we've seen emergence of a lot of things like Snapchat AI. I've seen posts about people saying they've replaced their therapist with ChatGPT, things like that. What are your opinions on humans replacing their interactions with others with interacting with AI instead? And do you also think we might have some sort of social singularity where people are interacting more with machines than they are with other people? Is there anything you think we can do about that? And do you see that as a scenario?
It's again a really big question. I don't know. It's not my world of expertise. I don't really interact with AIs or people, if I'm honest. But I don't. We've all seen like Her and these other movies, right, where people fall in love with these things. And I do believe that there was a survey that was done where a lot of Americans think that GPT is already conscious. So I do think that we will end up building relations, particularly in games, right? These what are they called, NPCs? Like these things are gonna feel like they're real people, and I think that might be a first initial indicator of the challenges that this might cause, right? And again, the goal of those agents, in some respect, is to keep you engaged within those games. So I think we do need to face into it. I think that we've already probably seen some of the sort of precursors to this, where algorithms have been used to try to keep us engaged in, Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And we're starting to kind of see the effect it has on people, on teenagers and depression. Again, what I'm hoping, and this is a big hope, is that the more people we can free from these economic constraints, where they don't need to necessarily be paid, could they use these technologies to go and solve some of those problems? Like, so for example, bad example, but if I was free to do whatever I want, maybe what I'll do is I'll create a platform that connects two communities. Maybe there's like this old people's home community where we got old people dying, bored and depressed. You've got this other community over here that want to learn about things, that languages or whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a platform that connects those two people together. And I can do that for pretty much free because I can get a large language model to go and build it for me. So what I would hope really is that we use our creativity to go and face into solving those problems and fight us sort of against the kind of might be the capitalistic model to use them just to keep people's attention.
Thanks a lot for the talk. I had a question about one of the suggestions you made, that maybe in 18 months, the LLM becomes like a PhD student. If it becomes that great, do you have any perspectives on what happens to knowledge workers in that world? And maybe, as an example, we can use management consultants as a brand of that.
It's a tricky one, isn't it, to play out? I think the word there is knowledge, because even if you had a smart agent that was able to kind of reason and set experiments and things like that, a PhD, it still needs to access the data, the information to be able to go and reason. It also needs to be given a goal, and human beings are the ones that are giving it its intent. So the question that I would be asking myself is, do knowledge workers have access to data that's more difficult for the AI to get access to? And if it is difficult for the AI to get access to it, then they might be more immune. That would be what I would look at.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for the talk. I'm going to focus on the more optimistic outlook that you brought up, but the abundance, economic abundance for everyone and freeing people up. I was just wondering, to make that happen, do we need a kind of more of a strategy? Do we need a governance? Do we need a people's assembly? Also, what kind of timeline are we looking at? If we let it free, how long are we looking? Are we looking at generations or?
Well, it's a great question. I used to think we had to, again, 40 years to solve that problem, which means that, we'd have a couple of generations to sort of educate people, to help them understand how to find and understand what it means to be happy. Because I think the concern, if you free everybody up now, we won't necessarily know what makes us happy. I asked you the question, what would make you happy? And most people, they'll say, I want to do something nice, but they don't quite know what it will be. And so I thought we had 30 or 40 years. And I thought that, between now and then, as we are freeing up people from work, we could use AI to more granularly allocate people to new opportunities. Today I could be a photographer, tomorrow I could be a logo designer, the next day I could be an Uber driver. So you could sort of granularize work rather than having roles. I think my worry now is because of the arms race around large language models, that is going to happen quite quickly. And so what do we need to do to try and make a world of abundance successful? Well, first of all, I think that it takes a long time for these technologies to actually be integrated into our businesses. We know that people implement them and it doesn't work, and it takes several years of cycles to do that. So I think we've got longer than 5 years to worry about it. But I don't know what governments could put in place to mitigate the risk. Again, I'm hopeful that if we gradually free more and more people up and these technologies become more abundant, then people will use them to solve these problems. I can't imagine how we will solve the problems, but what I'm hoping is if we can unlock the creative capacity of humanity, they will figure out how to solve them. It's a big hope. Yeah.
Hi, Daniel. How sustainable are the AI innovations and applications you've discussed this evening? How sustainable are they that when there's over contention and under provisioning of compute infrastructure globally to support those applications, and it's unlikely to be solved in the next 5 years? And I'm thinking at a high performance and high throughput computing scale.
There are different ways they can be solved, and again, I don't know whether it will be. But one way is that these models actually, there is a sort of a trend to make them smaller, and then tune them to become specialists. You don't need to have necessarily big brains that you put loads and loads and loads of information in because they get confused. We've seen them hallucinate. So there is actually a trend towards building smaller brains and specializing them, agentic computing. Obviously, you've got companies like DeepMind that are looking at trying to figure out how to use AI to solve fusion and energy problems. You've got people like Sam Altman that are going to be investing in nuclear energy. You've got new innovations in chips. So neuromorphic computing, one of the things that you'll learn about if you Google it is that neuromorphic computing isn't just about the concept of spiking neural networks, but there's been, over the past decade or so, a massive amount of investment in chips, actual physical chips that process spikes. So in fact, actually, Intel a few months ago launched Lori, which is a neuromorphic computer. There's a few spin-outs from the UK, Spinnaker. So and again, those chips are much more efficient. So I think that we've got some challenges, but I also believe that there are innovations that are going to come out that will address some of them.
Hi. Fantastic, thank you. You mentioned, I totally agree with your thoughts about abundance. Quite how soon that's going to happen, how we manage it is definitely the question. The other person you quoted was Putin and the idea of sovereign AI, I guess, or nation state AI. What's your experience or understanding of what's happening there and how that conflicts with the abundant? Everyone shares this asset. I'm going to answer a different question. I might come back to answering this question, which is, one of the sort of pushbacks is, well, there will always be people like Putin that will want to maintain power and control. Oh, that's very good. And there's also individuals that will want more stuff, right? We want more stuff. I'm going to answer the second one first, which is, once you reach a certain amount of wealth, and people have done studies on this, like that ceiling is not very high. Having an extra car or an extra bedroom is a burden. Like, more stuff ends up becoming a burden. And I know it's a cliche, and lots of things, people say that on the internet, but the reality is that they've done studies and say it doesn't take you very much to get to the point where stuff becomes less important And actually, it's human connections and relationships and authentic experiences that matter. Now, if you want a gold-plated Lamborghini, you probably also need a therapist. Yeah, and having more stuff will become not a differentiator. It's going back to what Jean-Luc Picard said. It's about our ability to contribute to humanity, and I think that that's what will become important. If we did make people economically freer, then how can you be controlled? If you're economically free, then how can somebody control you? Can Trump then, what does he have over you? So I think that's one of the ideas, is if you can make people free economically, they also are free from being controlled by these bad actors. Let's see. It is a transition period, and I think, yeah, it's an exciting decade to be alive. I've been understatement.
Daniel,
yeah,
thank you very much. Been completely awesome. I'm going to take you down out of geopolitiks, behavioral psychology, and philosophy, and come back to a little bit of tech.
Great.
So we've got this ongoing expansion of models and model parameters, the hungriness for data, likely to run out of generally available good quality data, and also you work in marketing. And qualitative research and understanding of organizational behaviors. So the question is, what's your view of the validity of synthetic data and its appropriateness for the kind of work we need to do in the next few years?
Okay. So I'm smiling because I wrote an email today to Mark Reed answering this question. I need to remember it now. So there are, let's say there are 5 ways of getting access to data. So, which by the way is a differentiator right now. So the first way is to scrape data from the internet, and the second way is to go and purchase data. So then the race is on. OpenAI and other companies are now trying to build relationship with music producers and content producers to get access to their data. The third way is synthetic data. And I think there was a Financial Times article either today or yesterday suggesting that, synthetic data is problematic because you end up garbage out, ends up garbage in. Used to be garbage in, garbage out, right? So garbage out now ends up being garbage in. You end up learning and reinforcing the nonsense. I like the idea of simulations, and simulations have been very successful in helping us build autonomous vehicles, but there are always corner cases that we haven't ever thought of. I like the example, I think it was Tesla, where there was a corner case where in the physical world, there was a truck. In the back of the truck, there were loads of traffic lights in the back of the truck. And the Tesla thought, of course, they were just traffic lights in the road. And of course, they weren't. They were in the truck. So that was a corner case that, no simulation would have really ever come up with. So I think synthetic data is, on the one hand, a good thing if it gives you variance. If it doesn't give you variance, then it's problematic. So the fourth way is human beings. It's how do we mine the knowledge, the data that's in your head, and that's why having human in the loop teaching these things is very important. And the final way, which I think is the most exciting thing for me, is inference and experimentation. So, and again, this goes back to this idea of like PhDs. So, if I had in my data the ability to statistically infer that Socrates is a man, and then I have in my data the ability to statistically infer that all men are mortal. At the moment, if you don't have the data to statistically infer that Socrates is mortal, it won't be able to do it. But what reasoning will allow you to do is create that new knowledge. It says, I can actually now reason with these axioms, these things that I believe to be true, and I'm able to now create new knowledge. Not just create new knowledge, but I'll actually start to create experiments and then test those experimentations. That allows us to then create new data, new knowledge. And I actually think that it's the companies that get there first, the companies that will build machines that can intelligently create new knowledge, robust new knowledge, they'll actually potentially accelerate. Now, I don't know how fast they might lead that they might have the ultimate lead, and they'll be impossible to catch, or you might have other companies that are working on this. But this ability to reason, experiment, and inference is a very powerful and important idea. Did that answer your question? 5 things. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
And a question for you. So when you see the likes of OpenAI hiring graduates straight out of university, data scientists at $700,000 a year, there's a huge danger that these big corporations, the ones with the biggest wallets, are going to control the narrative. How do you react to that?
How do I react to that? Well, very good luck to those that are getting that pay. It's good. It's not good for me because I can't pay that enough, that amount. Which is why purpose is important, by the way. If you've got purpose, then hopefully you'll retain and attract talent. It's very hard to compete against those numbers. I guess what we're seeing though, so as I said, I don't think the technology is the differentiator. I think it's how you use the technology, and OpenAI and those companies are hiring very, very smart people to go and build these technologies. But ultimately, you're the ones that are going to be using the technologies, and I think that's the talent that you need to be attracting. I don't think that they necessarily control the narrative. I think there's enough diversity going on around the world, freedom of press, and all of us as well, that I think can challenge that narrative. What's your concern? Just out of curiosity, what's your concern?
We've seen in the past where these big companies with big deep pockets can control the technology and how it's used, how it's deployed, etc.
Yeah.
And it's a concern that I think a lot of people share, that you're moving away from ethical implementation of AI systems. I know you're a big advocate of open source.
I'm an advocate of, I am an advocate of open source. I think what I'd like to think is that, when I was at university 2 decades ago, whatever, then what was successful was doing a computer science degree, getting a job in a bank, and getting a house, and then getting to the old people's home of your dreams. That was the kind of what that was success. And having it now educated like the next generation, I find them to be much more purposeful. They wanted to go and do things and work for companies that they are proud to work for. And so I think, again, if we can just educate people to be able to make better decisions, and again, you don't need to have that much money to take money off the table. I know that when you're young, lots of money feels important, but it takes 3 or 4 years for you to realize that it's not. And so if we can take money off the table and make purpose the focus, then hopefully that will make things better.
I think my mic's dying. One more question.
Cheers, thank you. Just a comment, a couple of answers ago, you kind of smashed 2 ideas together, one about creating new knowledge and one about reasoning from axioms as a way to create new knowledge. But by definition, reasoning from axioms doesn't create new knowledge, it's just a redescription of what's already known. So really, to create new knowledge, that experimentation is really the key. And I think there's still some of that quite lacking in our current AI systems. But really, the question that I wanted to ask is just to push back a little bit on your techno-optimism. So you talked about this idea of like a future of abundance, and in response to an earlier question, you said, well, if you have this economic freedom, then who can control you? But there's a couple of problems that I see with this. And firstly, if we think about who controls the tech. So there are massive costs involved in running these systems and training these systems, not only environmental costs, but not only energy costs, but environmental costs like rare earth minerals and things like that we have to mine from the ground. So there's not an abundance there. There is a built-in scarcity in the planet in terms of what we can actually build, because we can only access so many rare earth minerals to build chips. As a result, there's going to be a limit in the availability of these systems. And what you see happening now already is you see large compute controlled by a smaller and smaller group of companies. And so these AI models might create economic freedom for people, but only those who have access to these models, right? And only have access to the compute. And you said, okay, if you have economic freedom, what can anybody do to take it away from you? They can take away your access to those models.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. So I'd argue that if you didn't have in your data set that Socrates was mortal and you were able to infer that, I would argue that's new data. But we can have it's data that you didn't have. But you didn't need that data didn't exist. But we can talk about that over a beer if you want. The second is that it's not necessarily yes, of course, there's a finite amount of resources in terms of building the technologies, but the question of abundance is not giving everybody a supercomputer to allow them to build their own large language model. The idea of abundance is to give everybody access to healthcare, food, education, energy, transport, to give them economic freedom to do what they want. It's not to give them a supercomputer necessarily. So yes, there are, a certain limit in terms of metal and stuff, but we could still create an abundance of food and healthcare. I'm trying to figure out what you said. The last point. What was the last point you said? Sorry. Yeah. No, sorry. No, so you're saying that only the people that have access to the technologies have access to abundance. But I just gave you an example of where old people in an old people's home could get could teach people languages. Like giving people the ability to access languages is I would argue an ability to give abundance, and that requires a platform that we could probably build in a weekend. Right, so I could make access to language education abundant. We could give access to people access to the internet abundant to everybody on the planet. We don't need infinite resources to give everybody access to. I know you're shaking your head, but I think we can. I think we can give people access to education and coffee and things like that. I think we've got enough stuff on the planet to feed everybody. I'm not trying to justify like a utopia. I'm very happy if somebody says to me, Daniel, there's a better view of the world, right? There's a better view of the world that we should be going to. Let's create a dictator that runs the world. If you can convince me that's a better solution, then I'm all for it. My solution right now is to figure out how to free people from not having to live on $1 a day and giving those people the ability to contribute to humanity that makes them happy. And if you can give me an alternative solution, I'm happy to go and do that. So happy to grab a beer with you if you want. Okay, thank you.
I think it's fair to say that was a marathon. And I think it's fair to say that Daniel has done an amazing job of answering the questions, especially when I tell you that he only flew in from Delhi this morning and then jumped on a train to come and be with us this evening. So I think a standing ovation is called for. Absolutely exceptional. So thank you for all your questions. Thank you for coming tonight. And it's been a really, really special evening. And our debt of gratitude goes out to everyone that's contributed to the event tonight, from Silicon Brighton to the guys at PlusX, to my own team, and to all the Brighton AI co-leads and so on. It's been an absolutely wonderful event. I'd just like to point out our next event is on the 4th of September, so save the date. And that will be here again at PlusX. And that will be run by our innovation and commercialization team, by our two co-leads. So thank you very much indeed for coming. And now over to networking. So big round of applause for everyone that got involved.